This is going to be a short lecture on not necessarily what the class is going to be about, but about what the topic of this class is, um, which is um, sort of that in between state of drawing and painting. It's drawing with color. Um, and I have to say, there isn't that many artists that I know of who do a lot of drawing with color. Most artists I know, 2D artists, they tend to do black and white drawings, and then when they want to transition into color, they immediately jump into painting. So we're in this class, we're in this sort of weird in between zone of color drawing, and I wanted to just go over some historical um, references to show you throughout history how other artists have used color drawing all the way up to the present day. And it just and I have to say, there isn't that many artists who sort of exist in this realm, so um, it wasn't the easiest thing to try to pull together a bunch of images, but let me see here. Um, Traditionally, this is Peter Paul Rubens. This is a study for a larger painting, um, which is The Fall of the Damned, and he's doing a thing that a lot of traditional artists do, which is they're trying to do a preparatory sketch for a painting, and this is a really good exercise if you're not necessarily certain about what you're going to do for the larger painting, what the composition is going to be like, and also what is, I think, let me skip ahead to the next slide. What also is helpful is that the traditional technique of using the red chalk helps to sort of sort out the temperatures. So your grays and your black and whites are your cools, and the minute you have something warm like that red chalk, it really sort of flips the temperature to that extreme warm that kind of comes forward in the flesh, and that's probably the first thing I always recommend students who are first learning how to paint with color or even draw with color in my figure drawing classes. I always say sort out your first you got to figure out your drawing. Second, you have to figure out your lights and darks, and then the next step, before you start thinking about all the colors, just simply think about the temperature shifts. Where are the warms? Where are the cools? And then you can add, extra fancy colors. But I always say drawing, values, which is your lights and darks, and then temperature. That's like your first little baby step into color. And I like this drawing because you can kind of see I think he's using like a brush and even kind of like getting the chalk wet, and it kind of looks like paint. Kind of see that a little bit over here. Watteau, a French painter, um, doing a similar technique. This is like the traditional old school, old master technique of three colors. Um, and so you have the paper as your one color, your red chalk as your other color, and your white as your third color. Well, I guess that's before because you're white, black, red, and then paper. Um, and again, it's a good way to keep it simple, sort out your drawing, and then sort out your temperature shifts. And there's a lot that can be done with just this minimal amount of color. I mean, we see like the red chalk is being mixed with the white, creating like a pink. Um, and whenever you might find this hard to believe, I don't know, maybe you can see it. Um, Black becomes your cool. Once you have like a warm red, like this red chalk, your black starts to appear slightly more like grayish blue. Um, Everything is relative. Um, if you were to start sticking in some blue chalk into this, all of a sudden the blue's your coolest color. But at this stage, where everything is relative, your black chalk is your cool, and you can even see once you start mixing it in with a little bit of the white, it can here becomes like a cool gray. everything's relative. I'm going to go over color theory in another lecture. Rembrandt. Everyone should know Rembrandt. Um, so he's really good at doing these prep sketches. Same thing, sorting out the temperatures. It's like he has cool shadows, the cool grays. The light sort of makes things a little warmer over here. Um, this is sort of what your underpainting should look like too once you move into painting. In general, I feel like this class is like your stepping stone into painting. And one thing I think is just good to know, especially if you're going to paint representationally, not everybody does, but your underpainting should always have, like from the, I mean, not always, but I'm talking about like from the traditional sort of old school way of approaching things. The underpainting should have your drawing figured out, where are all the shapes being placed, your composition, where are your lights and darks, you're blocking in the big masses of light and then shadow, and then the temperatures, like where's the warms, where are the cools, before you even think about detail. You don't want to get lost in the detail. I call this making the cake before putting the frosting on. The detail being the frosting. Salvatore Rosa, same thing. Again, I think it should be really clear what they're doing. It's a prep drawing for a painting, and they're sorting out the composition and the temperatures. I think Rembrandt's a little better. Um, Probably one of the best draftsmen from art history, in my opinion. Um, Degas. Um, he sort of was doing a lot of oil painting and switched over to pastel. And we're going to be using pastel in this class also with color pencil and a bunch of other things. But he, it's I think he was like I think more interested in drawing, so it makes sense that he sort of, not that he gave up on oil painting, but he sort of put oil painting on the back burner so he could focus on more of a drawing medium. Even though technically, some people telling me this, like museum people tell me that technically pastel's in the category of painting, which is kind of weird, but whatever. I'm not really that technical. But you're having to hand apply everything, and it's a little trickier because when you're using pastel, you don't have the option to mix as much. You can mix, but it's a little trickier because when you're painting with a palette, you can kind of just add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you can kind of mix up a big pile of paint. With pastel, you kind of have to mix on the paper and layer it and kind of smudge it together if you want to mix. That's why it's usually good to have a big wide selection of different colors and different values in pastel, so you don't have to mix as much. And yeah, but lots of layers. And if you ever see any of these in person, I think sometimes he would even use a type of like paint underneath too, like a casein, which is kind of like a gouache. But I love the shadow color here, the shadowy green to that kind of turquoise in the light. I mean, there's lots of lot to like about this. Composition's great too. Some of them, as he got older, would loosen up a lot more. Yeah, I kind of feel like you can kind of see the brush strokes in some of this. I think that's where he's using some of like the casein. Um, and also he would layer lots of spray fixative. So that's one of the supplies I highly recommend everyone get is a spray fixative when you move on to pastels because it will smudge away real easily. And you can kind of do it in layers. You can put like a layer, draw for a few layers, spray it, and then draw again and draw again. And you don't have to worry about the under layers mushing together if you put a lot of layers of fix. I think he was losing his eyesight, so you can kind of see it, like it reads perfectly when you squint. Nice clear shapes. But you can clearly see he's using a brush too here. This is like, these are brush lines. These aren't hand-drawn lines. Landscape. He wasn't big on landscape, but I love how simple the shadows are, just black, stark black. This is Paul Cézanne, and um, and again, whenever we're in this in between zone between drawing and painting, there's going to be some um, it's like gray area of like his watercolor part of drawing. I mean, sort of like, I don't really necessarily encourage you guys to use paint, but I do allow you guys to use ink. And if you're gonna use ink, you can use colored ink, and colored ink is not that far away from watercolor. So I guess the only like paint I'll sort of like be okay with, or at least I'll look the other way, is if you sort of use a little bit of colored ink or watercolor. But I think we should keep that to a minimum for this class. But this is Paul Cézanne. Um, he sort of was, the beginning of more modernist painting. He's breaking up the space. You can kind of see how it's starting to feel abstract. Everything's starting to flatten out. The space kind of fluctuates. The edges kind of fluctuate. There's a lot of uncertainty of like where things are. And the pencil line. I'm assuming he did that first. I don't know, but the pencil line kind of has more kind of clarity of where edges go. And then once he starts coming in with the bigger brush strokes, it starts to create more of an atmospheric, volumetric kind of hint. It's not even fully there. I feel like this painting is like a hint of a still life. It's like I feel like I can't quite grasp it. He's doing the same thing here. It's like he has these kind of clear edges with the pencils, and then he adds these kind of atmospheric dabs of color, kind of fluctuating the edges and the shapes. You can tell there's kind of a tree there, kind of a building there, but you're not certain. And this is it's like a Russian painter. He died in the 1940s, so he's a little bit after Cezanne. Um, I can't find that many of his pieces, but I love these color pencil drawings that he would do. Also, I'm assuming they're studies for paintings. But once you kind of have the sort of the drawings kind of well suited or well situated, and I think it's handy to just kind of have a hint of like what's the palette going to be, like, of the shadows going to be blue, is this going to be red orange, this going to be brown, and once you kind of start to see it shaping in the drawing, it's easy to just switch over to the painting. And I'm going to try to show you some more finished drawings. Even I don't necessarily want to show you studies. I have some later here. I always enjoy looking at Pablo Picasso's sketchbooks. This is color pencil. I think the top might be color pencil, might be pen. I can't tell. You can see the date, 1955. Sort of like one of the grandkids of Cezanne, not literally. Also doing a very similar thing, kind of taking it to the next extreme of breaking up the space, playing with color. It's very note-like. It doesn't quite feel complete. It feels like it's note taking for a painting. And again, there's lots of, so he's utilizing a lot of the white space of the paper, um, which when you're drawing like this, I think to some degree you kind of have to be okay with kind of letting the space of the page just kind of just be. You could always tone the paper or use tone paper. Like lots of times, whenever I have a white sketchbook pad, I always take a few pages and I tone it with acrylic paint. A few, just to sort of have toned, colored paper, so I can then use white on top. But he's able to do a lot. I mean, I feel like they're very sculptural. This thing, even though it looks very 2D and flat, it kind of reminds me of his sculptures. I always felt like the exciting part about Pablo Picasso was his willingness to explore and do lots of different things. But that sort of exploration also made him sort of a little unfocused. He kind of seems to wander here and there and always experimenting. Everything always kind of feels a little underdeveloped, even though it's always really exciting to see what he's doing. And this is sort of around the same time period as Picasso's. I feel like de Kooning's early paintings of women kind of are a throwback to sort of early Picasso's Cubist women. This is charcoal and pastel, and you kind of see he's doing lots of layers and destroying. It's also kind of a Matisse trick. Matisse would do this. He would do lots of drawing and then smear it away and then draw it again and again and again and just build it up and build it up, and you would kind of see some of the older drawings kind of ghosted in there, and in the haze somewhere. Another de Kooning also looks a lot like those early Picassos. I think in general, like I'm gonna have you guys do a sort of similar exercise where you're sort of having to draw on top of another drawing. It's not necessarily a cubist kind of exercise, but one thing I think if you're sort of looking at something that seems kind of cubist, to just sort of get it straight in your mind to understand what you're doing, is to just think of it as like an image seen through like a shattered glass or shattered mirror, where the space and maybe even the time is kind of getting distorted, but it's in there somewhere. Solo um, sort of moving into more like minimalist stuff. Um, Solo if you see a lot of his work in a museum, 9 times out of 10 it wasn't done by him. He kind of would create these sort of instructions of like how an image should be made. He'd list like like for instance for this one, maybe starting in the center with like yellow line, it radiate 20 different lines, and then it would just give you a step by step instructions on how to create something, and then the museum hands would actually execute it. Um, this is I, I believe it was done. This was done with ink. Um, R.B. Kitai, um, a Los Angeles artist, he sort of did this similar thing as Degas. He sort of moved on into pastel and kind of did less and less oil painting. Another Kitai. This is called The Rise of Fascism. This is from 1980. Pastel, charcoal, and even oil on paper. I can't tell where the oil is, but I do think it's kind of interesting to see all like the layers. It's like he looks like he's like taping together sheets of paper. This artist, I don't really know that much about this artist. He does these they're obviously from photographs. I guess this is in the realm of photorealism. Um, they're kind of mocking in a weird way. They kind of remind me of as if he's sort of making fun of people who do plein air painting. Plein air painting is when you go outside and paint outside from life. And then he does these little texts at the bottom. It's kind of like the internal thoughts. Wherever I was, I found myself painting the same image over and over again my entire life. Um, yeah, they're kind of humorous and a little. I don't know. They seem kind of sad to me. Here's another one. Um, I'll shape the grays, the blues, and the greens both in and around me until everything blends together. Two worlds becoming one. Yeah, I've done outdoor painting. It's really enjoyable. It's a pain in the butt, and you can kind of see color a lot clearer. But these are definitely um, done in the studio based on photographs, and at times I can't tell if they're an homage to plein air painting or they're a mocking of plein air painting. Probably a little bit of both. Barbara Walker. Um, I like this drawing only because, not only because, one of the reasons why I like how the focal point of the main figure is the only part that isn't done in full color, but yet it seems to stand out the most. All the colored um, dolls seem to disappear a little bit. Neo Rausch, um, contemporary German painter, you should really take a look at his paintings to really get an idea of how amazing he is. But I do love his drawings because they're so immediate. They're so like almost like throwaway. Um, he draws. If there's a really great documentary you should watch of his, where you see him painting in the studio, and he's completely making the images up out of his imagination. And he manages to paint these oil paintings that seem fairly representational, even though they're a little cartoony. Um, it's very stream of consciousness, very dreamlike. Everything is made up out of his imagination. Um, and I know he said about his drawings that he deliberately draws them on throwaway, crappy paper, so he doesn't and which is a good thing to do. I always say have like some throwaway like printer paper, so you can feel free to warm up on that stuff. So it once you when you are drawing a crappy paper, it really does free you up. You feel like there's no mistakes you can make. Um, and believe it or not, this drawing sold for $18,000. I found this on an auction website. Um, his paintings sell for a lot more, but this is another one. I think the word at the top translates into to a trap or setting a trap. So that's what's sort of going on here. And it's interesting. Like it looks like pencil or maybe even marker, the black and white. And he's known for just using throwaway markers to just fill in color. Here's another one, just like quick, just fill in. Just looks like magic marker kind of fill in. Um, and these three figures looks like a donkey that's right here. I always say when again, this is a prep sketch for probably a painting. The first thing I always say when students are drawing, I always find students are obsessed with line and they tend to not move beyond that. The beginning drawing class, I'm always trying to get students to move outside of just line only. So I always tell them after you create your line, the next thing you should probably figure out is how are you going to light your drawing? Like where's the light coming from? Where the shadow mask is going to be? Maybe think of cross contour, and then after you kind of think about that, then maybe think about what's the general color scheme. Where is it mostly blue, mostly cools, warms, and something as simple as this drawing with a simple like scribble in of magic marker is a good way of just sorting out like what's my color composition. After you figured out your drawing composition, what's the color scheme going to be? Same thing again. Really quick throwaway drawing. Looks like colored ink. Can't tell if this is paint or marker. This gray looks like oil paint to me. This is an illustrator named Ryan Humphrey. I think by the end of this class, it'd be nice if everyone's sketchbook looked as colorful as this. Like, I kind of want you guys to have just very vibrant, colorful, loose sketchbooks. It doesn't have to be like masterpieces. Just as long as you're starting to think about color, thinking about how color defines form, defines space, creates mood, um, and it's a really useful sort of stepping stone for your paintings because everyone should move on to painting. Not that painting is the end all be all, but you should all at least be trying to move on to painting eventually. This is a contemporary painter. He's very like an old school type painter, Jerome Whitkin. He does these very like large narratives, but I love this pastel. It's just like a study. Could be a study just in and of itself. Could be a study for a painting. I don't know, but pastel is very different than color pencil. Color pencil, you can blend with color pencil. It's a little harder. Pastel is way easier to blend. And when you're using color pencil, you kind of have to let your white be the paper, unless you're using something opaque or caking on really heavy white colored pencil, or using like a gel pen on top. Here you have the luxury of being able to use the paper, and you can erase out also. This to me looks like an erasure here. And I always love these Studio Ghibli little studies. What do you call these? Like storyboards. Um, they quickly kind of try to, I feel like, show you sort of like what the kind of key colors are going to be, kind of skimmed in. They're not crazy detailed like most storyboards, but I like how they really kind of are able to sort of create a little bit more of a mood with these little color scribbles, and they don't even do it on the foreground figures. This is a contemporary illustrator. Um, I don't know what this was for. I mean, most illustrators, you should always keep in mind that they're doing their drawing for something, for some type of publication, or It's they're heavily art directed. Every once in a while, if you go to like their website, they'll have some personal work, but a good chunk of it's going to be work that's been directed. And not a lot of illustrators that I know of use color pencil. Like when I was going to art school, there was a huge populate. The thing that was popular was people using gouache. I mean, if they weren't doing it in the computer, which that's like half of them are doing it in the computer solely, but whenever people would do it by hand, I remember gouache was really popular. Um, I like these because there's I haven't seen too many illustrators use color pencil so heavily, and I do appreciate the the able to sort of let the white stand on its own. I haven't shown you a lot of drawings on tone paper in this slide lecture, but we're going to be doing a lot of drawings on tone paper also. This artist, I don't really know much about him, but I was asking around if anyone knew of any landscape artist who used color drawing, and this name came up. Um, they look like they're done outside. Like he actually goes outside. I think I went to his website. He does have images of himself outside drawing, and I feel like he uses a lot of tricks that remind me of Van Gogh. If you ever look at Van Gogh's drawings, Van Gogh uses a lot of hatching, and he'll kind of change direction. Like he'll hatch in one direction and then switch to another direction. There's a lot of Van Gogh tricks in these drawings, and I like how again, like he's doing a lot with a little. I like how these shadows, instead of just being a solid fill in, it's just this kind of hatchy, dashy thing, which is super Van Gogh. Like this dash hatch line, all going in the same direction. And that's right out of the Van Gogh playbook. I just think they're pretty. I put a lot in here. And quick. I like too. Like most people when they think of outdoor landscapes, they think of painting. I like how you should feel free. You can go outside and not have to worry about setting up painting. You can just grab a handful of color pencils or pastels and go to town. This is a contemporary artist who I've always liked him. His work, his finished work is oil painting. He does these oil paintings of these weird sculptural blobby things that he'll make them and then he'll photograph them. And then the oil paintings are super photorealistic looking, but I like the drawings. They're a little more looser and a little more playful. I like these weird, also these kind of odd cross contours that almost kind of looks like a topological map. It's not quite cross contour, but it's like topological map contour thing. And he's mixing all kinds of weird mediums together here. This is color pencil, graphite, crayon, which would just be like a more waxy kind of pastel. And you kind of see this is the ink. It looks like ink. Another strange one. This one's called Wild Salad from 2016. Colored pencil, crayon, graphite. 22 inches by 25 inches. And again, it looks like some of this stuff is from life, and then some of his weird little clay globular sculpture things he threw in there. This is color pencil and graphite. So I just kind of wanted to give you just a brief, quick little glimpse at what territory we're going to be occupying. And I deliberately try to show you like a wide range of different things. Like I'm not expecting you guys to like specifically stick to a certain style or a certain thing. I kind of want everyone to stretch out, experiment a little bit, try lots of things that are outside your comfort zone. It should be fun.